4. Perhaps every accidental cluster of people has a short period of grace, in between the initial shyness and prejudice on the one hand and eventual repugnance and betrayal on the other. For Bach, it seemed that his summer obsession with the then Galinda made sense if only to usher in this following more mature comfort with a circle of friends who had begun to feel inevitably and permanently connected. The boys still weren't allowed access to Craig Hall, nor the girls to the boys' school, but the city center area of Shiz became an extension of the parlors and lecture halls in which they were allowed to mingle. On a midweek afternoon, on a weekend morning, they would meet by the canal with a bottle of wine, or in a cafe or student watering hole, or they would walk about and discuss the fine points of Shiz architecture, or they would laugh about the excesses of their teachers. Bach and Avarik, Elphaba and Nessarose with Nanny, Glinda and sometimes Fanny and Shen and Milla, and sometimes Crope and Tibbet. And Crope brought Fiyero along and introduced him, which frosted Tibbet for a week or so until the evening that Fiyero said, in his very shy formal way, "Of course, I have been married for some time. We marry young in the Winkus." The others were agog at the notion and felt juvenile. To be sure, Elphaba and Avarik needled each other mercilessly. Nessarose tried everyone's patience with her religious rantings. Crope's and Tibbet's stream of saucy remarks got them dumped in the canal more than once, but Bach was relieved to find that his crush on Glinda was lifting somewhat. She sat on the edge of the picnic blanket with a look of self-reliance, and she diverted conversation away from her. She had loved the girl who had loved the glamour in herself, and that girl seemed to have disappeared. But he was happy to have Glinda as a friend. Well, in a nutshell, he had loved Galinda, and this now was Glinda. Someone he could no longer quite figure out. Case closed. It was a charmed circle. All the girls steered clear of Madame Morble while they could. One cold evening, however, Grommatic came hunting for the Throp sisters. Nanny huffed and wound the strings of a fresh apron around her waist and prodded Nessarose and Elphaba downstairs toward the parlor of the head. "I hate that Grommatic thing," said Nessarose. "However, does it work anyway? Is it clockwork, or is it magicid? Or some combination of the two? I always imagined a bit of nonsense, that there was a dwarf inside, or an acrobatic family of elves, each working a limb," said Elphaba. "Whenever Grommatic comes around, my hand gets a strange hunger for a hammer." "I can't imagine," Nessarose said. "Hand hunger, I mean." "Hush, you two, the thing has ears," Nanny said. Madame Morble was glancing through the financial papers, making a few marks in the margin before she deigned to acknowledge her students. "This won't take but a moment," she said. "I've had a letter from your dear father and a package for you. I thought it kindest to deliver the news myself." "News?" said Nessarose, blanching. "He could have written to us as well as to you," said Elphaba. Madame Morble ignored her. "He writes to ask of Nessarose's health and progress, and to tell you both that he is going to undertake a fast and penance for the return of Ozma Tippetarius." "Oh," The blessed little girl, said Nanny, warming to one of her favorite subjects. When the wizard took over the palace all those years ago, and he had the Ozma region jailed, we all thought that the sainted Ozma child would call down disaster upon the wizard's head. But they say she's been spirited away and frozen in a cave like Lurlina. Has Frexpar got the metal to melt her? Is now her time to return? Please, said Madame Morble to the sisters, with a sour glance at Nancy. I haven't asked you here so that your nanny could discuss this contemporary apocrypha, nor do I slander our glorious wizard. It was a peaceful transition of power. That the Ozma regent's health failed while under the house arrest was a mere coincidence, nothing more. As to the power of your father to raise the missing royal child from some unsubstantiated state of somnolence, well, you've as much as admitted to me that your father is erratic, if not mad. I can only wish him health in his endeavors, but I feel it my duty to point out to you girls that we do not smile on seditious attitudes at Crage Hall. I hope you have not imported your father's royalist yearnings into the dormitories here. We assign ourselves to the unnamed god, not to the wizard, nor to any possible remnant of the royal family, Nesserose said proudly. I have no feeling on the matter at all, muttered Elphaba, except that father loves lost causes. Very well, said the head. As it should be. Now I have had a package for you. She handed it to Elphaba, but added, It is for Nesserose, I think. Open it, Elfie, please, said Nesserose. Nanny leaned forward to look. Elphaba undid the cord and opened the wooden box. From a pile of ash shavings, she withdrew a shoe, and then another. Were they silver, or blue, or now red? Lacquered with a candy shell brilliance of polish? It was hard to tell, and it didn't matter. The effect was dazzling. Even Madame Morble gasped at their splendor. The surface of the shoes seemed to pulse with hundreds of reflections and refractions. In the firelight, it was like looking at the boiling corpuscles of blood under a magnifying glass. He writes that he bought them for you from some toothless tinker woman outside Ovels, said Madame Morble, and that he dressed them up with silver glass beads that he made himself, that someone had taught him to make? Turtle heart, said Nanny darkly. And Madame Morble flipped the letter over, squinting. He says he had hoped to give you something special before you left for university. But in the sudden circumstances of Amma Clutch's sickness, blah blah, he was unprepared. So now he sends them to his Nesserose to keep her beautiful feet warm and dry and beautiful, and he sends them with his love. Elphaba drove her fingers through the curlicues of shavings. There was nothing else in the box, nothing for her. Aren't they gorgeous? Nesserose exclaimed. Elfie, fix them on my feet, would you please? Oh, how they sparkle. Elphaba went on her knees before her sister. Nesserose sat as regal as any Ozma, spine erect and face glowing. Elphaba lifted her sister's feet and slipped off the common house slippers and replaced them with the dazzling shoes. How thoughtful he is, said Nesserose. Good thing you can stand on your own 2 feet, you, muttered Nanny to Elphaba, and put her old hand patronizingly on Elphaba's shoulder blades, but Elphaba shrugged it away. "They're just gorgeous," said Elphaba thickly. "Nessarose, they're made for you. They fit like a dream." "Oh, Elfie, don't be cross," Nessarose said, looking down at her feet. "Don't ruin my small happiness with resentment, will you? He knows you don't need this kind of thing." "Of course not," said Elphaba. "Of course I don't." That evening the friends risked breaking curfew by ordering another bottle of wine. Nanny tutted and fretted, but as she kept drowning her portion as neatly as anyone else, she was overruled. Fiyero told a story of how he had been married at the age of 7 to a girl from a neighboring tribe. They all gawped at his apparent lack of shame. He had only seen his bride once, by accident, when they were both about 9. "I won't really take up with her until we are 20, and I'm now only 18, he added, with the relief of imagining he might still be as virginal as the rest of them. They ordered yet another bottle of wine. The candles guttered, a small autumnal rain fell. Though the room was dry, Elphaba drew her cloak about her, as if anticipating the walk home. She had gotten over the sting of being overlooked by Frex. She and Nessarose began to tell funny stories about their father, as if to prove to themselves and to everyone else that nothing was amiss. Nessarose, who wasn't much of a drinker, allowed herself to laugh. "Despite my appearance, or maybe because of it, he always called me his beautiful pet," she said, alluding to her lack of arms for the first time in public. "He would say, 'Come here, my pet, and let me give you a piece of apple.' And I would walk over as best as I could, tilting and tottering, if Nanny or Elfie or Mother wasn't around to support me, and fall into his lap, and lean up smiling, and he'd drop small pieces of fruit into my mouth." "What did he call you, Elfie?" asked Glinda. "He called her Fabula," interrupted Nessarose. At home only," Elphaba said. "True, you are your father's little Fabula," crooned Nanny, almost to herself, just outside the circle of smiling faces. "Little Fabula, little Elphaba, little Elfie." "He never called me pet," said Elphaba, raising her glass to her sister, "but we all know he told the truth, as Nessarose is the pet in the family, hence those splendid shoes." Nessarose blushed and accepted a toast. "Ugh, but while I had his attention because of my condition, you captured his heart when you sang," she said. "Captured his heart? Ha! You mean I performed a necessary function." But the others said to Elphaba, "Oh, do you sing? Well then, sing. You must. Another bottle, another glass, push back the chair, and before we leave for the night, you must sing. Go on." "Only if the others will," said Elphaba, bossily. Buck? Some Munchkinlander spinel? A Varric, a Gillikinese ballad? Glinda, Nanny, a lullaby? "We know a dirty round. We'll go next if you go," said Crope and Tibbet. "And I will sing a Vinkis hunting chant," said Fiyero. Everyone chortled with pleasure and clapped him on the back. So then Elphaba had to stand, push her chair aside, clear her throat and sound a note into her cupped hands, and start, as if she were singing for her father again after all this time. The bar mother slapped her rag at some noisy older men to shush them, and the dart players dropped their hands to their sides. The room quieted down. Elphaba made up a little song on the spot, a song of longing and otherness, of far-aways and future days, Strangers closed their eyes to listen. Bach did too. Elphaba had an okay voice. He saw the imaginary place she conjured up. A land where injustice and common cruelty and despotic rule and the beggaring fist of drought didn't work together to hold everyone by the neck. No, he wasn't giving her credit. Elphaba had a good voice. It was controlled and feeling and not histrionic. He listened through to the end, and the song faded into the hush of a respectful pub. Later, he thought, the melody faded like a rainbow after a storm, or like winds dying down at last, and what was left was calm, and possibility, and relief. "You next! You promised!" cried Elphaba, pointing at Fiyero, but nobody would sing again, because she had done so well. Nessarose nodded to Nanny to wipe a tear from the corner of her eye. "Elphaba says she's not religious, but see how feelingly she sings of the afterlife," said Nessarose, and for once no one was inclined to argue.